see. We left off on page 208. 208. What are we covering? Devil worship, the shocking facts. No. Ark of the Beast, right? See if y'all paying attention out there. Okay, 208. We're about the middle of the page here. And it talks about here about how Yeshua compared the day of his return to the days of Noah. So in order to comprehend that and understand that what he was talking about and how the end days would be, we really have to go back and take a look and see how it was in the days of Noah. Okay? So everybody get in your time machine and we're going to roll back some time and go back. Okay? So Yeshua's time, he talked about this. Let's take a look at some scriptures here. In Genesis, fit it all in there. Genesis 6:11 through 12, it says, the earth was also corrupt before Yahweh, and the earth was lawless and filled with violence. So just as you see, as it says, in the days of Noah, so it is in these last days. Okay, it's full of violence, and the earth has become corrupt. So Yahweh looked upon the earth, and indeed it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. So we see here that the earth didn't just become this way, okay? Everything that took place was because mankind had done this to the earth. In Genesis 6, verse 5, it says, then Yahweh saw the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and every intent of the thoughts of man's heart was only evil continuously, okay? So it was continual evil thoughts. That's all the people thought about. Their thoughts were completely corrupted because their bodies and minds were corrupted together. And remember, this is what the peaceful solution is about, right? It's to change the hearts and minds of a person. In Isaiah 24:20, it says, the earth will reel to and fro like a drunkard and will sway like a hut. The transgression on it will be heavy upon it, and it will not fall, right? It will fall and not rise again, okay? I want you to think about something, okay? Because he says that the days of Noah, that the end times would be the same as the days of Noah, as in the days of Noah, okay? So when you look back and you see the way that it was in Noah's time, it's the same as it is today because people are still not thinking about what they're doing. The corruption had taken over the earth. The confusion had taken over their minds. You know, this Babylonian system was back in Noah's day. It's the same today. There's no difference. This Babylonian system which we live in has corrupted the hearts and the minds of the people and just taken their minds completely away to where they can't think logically. Now, just as he says that the intent of man's heart was evil continuously, it's the same today. Now in in Isaiah 24:20, it says, the earth will reel to and fro like a drunkard, right? And the transgression will be heavy upon it. It will fail, it will fall and not rise again, okay? So we see that the transgression, which is the breaking of Yahweh's law, is going to be heavy, notice, okay? It's like today, like it talks about the prophets, it says that the sin has reached its peak, right? So notice the transgression will be heavy. And when you think about Revelation 17:2, it says, with whom the kings of this earth have committed fornication and practiced idolatry, that is God worship, the worship of Elohim, and the inhabitants of the earth have made themselves drunk with the wine of her fornication. Okay? Now, just as in the days of Noah, all of these things were going on. God worship was rampant, and that's the reason why the earth ended up getting into the condition in which it was in. So we see here that they became drunken with God worship. Okay? Now, in 2 Kepha 2, verses 4 through 6, it says, and it shows the reason why the things were the way they are. If Yahweh did not spare the Malachim who had sinned, but would cast them into an abyss, delivering them into the change of darkness to be reserved for judgment. Now, they're free. Remember now, it's not like they're in prison. They're not chained up in prison. They're free to do what they want to do in their own realm, in their own spiritual realm. But their judgment is set for them. And he did not spare the ancient world, notice, but saved Noah, who was one of 8 people, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood on the world of the unrighteous, of those who were lawbreakers. And he condemned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah and destruction by reducing them to ashes. In this way he made them an example for those who would afterward lived unrighteously. Okay, so we have a clue here that as in Noah's time, as it says, Yahweh didn't spare the ancient world, and then he goes on to point out, connect like Sodom and Gomorrah was a time of destruction. And notice he says he will not spare them, and that this is an example. What occurred to Sodom and Gomorrah, their destruction, their nuclear destruction, okay, was an example for what we're going to see in these last days. And notice he says they were reduced by destruction, they reduced them to ashes, okay? And we see the same thing in Malachi 4, 1 and 3. For the word of Yahweh was given to me, saying, Behold, the day comes that will burn as an oven, and all the proud, and yes, all who do wickedly, will be stubble. Notice, they're going to be stubble. They're going to be burned up. On the day when this comes, it will burn them up, says Yahweh of hosts, and will leave them neither root nor branch. For the word of Yahweh has given to me, saying, The wicked will be trodden down, for they will be ashes under the soles of your feet in the day that this is done. Okay? Ashes. Well, remember what we just saw here about in the days of Noah, right? In the days of Noah, they weren't spared in the ancient world. Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed down to ashes. Same thing in these last days. We're going to see the ashes. The wicked will be the ashes under our feet because of the nuclear destruction. In Genesis 6:13, it says, And Yahweh said to Noah, The end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. Notice, it's through the people. It's the inhabitants of the earth. Now, what did Yahweh say in Isaiah 24? What did he say in Isaiah 24? He said the whole earth is going to be destroyed, right? Because the earth is defiled under the inhabitants of the people, right? Under the inhabitants of the people. So it's the people, it's their minds that are so confused. Now, he says here, it's the end of all flesh. In this commentary, Kiel and Dillich, commentary in the Old Testament, he says, The end of all flesh has come before me. He says, therefore, this is not the end in the sense of destruction, but the end or the extremity of the depravity or corruption which leads to destruction. In other words, the minds of the people are so depraved, and so it's this end of all flesh didn't mean that Yahweh just wiped out flesh completely. You know, if he'd have done that, Noah wouldn't have been saved either. But it shows that it's the end of this corruption, which leads to the destruction. Okay, and so because of the minds of men were corrupt, and it completely took over and it destroyed their minds, then Yahweh says that's what he was going to put an end to. Okay? Of course, that didn't last long, you know. I mean, after Noah's sons grew up and so forth, and the earth became populated again, it soon went the other way once again. Now, it also says in Yeshayahu 14, in Yeshayahu 14, he says, in verse 13, Son of man, when the sins of the earth have reached their peak, that is their full measure, I will stretch out my hands against it, and I will cut off the supply of bread, and famine will be upon the earth, and cut off man and beast from it. Okay? So this is Yeshayahu talking about the end times. Now he says, when the sins have reached their peak, their full measure, that's what had taken place in the days of Noah. Remember? In the days of Noah, sin had reached its peak, and as a result, it ended up to where the microbes could only do what they could do, and that was to just try and destroy it, okay? And that's what they were allowed to do. Now he says, Son of man, when the sins of the earth has reached its peak. Well, if you remember Daniel, okay, in Daniel 8:23 it says, in the days of the kingdom, when the transgressions have reached their fullness, the king of fierce expression, okay, he will come about. Now, that's what we see today, is that the transgressions have reached their fullness, or reached the peak of these things. And this is why we know we're living in the last days. And when he talks about this king of fierce expression, remember, king means a foundation of power. But that fierce expression, remember, that meant immorality, okay? And so this king of fierce expression, or the one who is in power, who forces this immorality by passing all of these laws, like the Supreme Court in the United States did. You know, like Daniel 7:25 says, it will pass many great laws. Then he will use his craftiness to fool the people, just as his agent Satan deceives the whole world. So we see here how it ties in with the days of Noah, and the way that the sin had gotten to a point where all of the earth was corrupt. And that's why Yeshua said that his return would be the same way. Okay, on page 208 here, now he says, Matthew 24, verse 36 to 39, but at that day and hour no man knows, not the Malachim in heaven, but my Father only. But as in the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that they were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving up marriages until the day that Noah entered into the ark. And you see that continuously. No one remains married. While they're married, they're giving up in marriage and marrying someone else, you know. Continual, and that's why Yeshua even told the people in his day, remember, you are a generation, an adulterous generation, an evil and adulterous generation. Because remember, they didn't think anything of the laws, okay? And he had to remind them. He says, do you not remember, do you not know that in the beginning Yahweh created man and woman, and the two would become as one? And what Yahweh has joined together, let no man put asunder, he said, right? Let no one separate. But of course, they didn't listen to that. So, and the people knew not until the flood came and took them all away, so also will be the coming of the Son of Man, because they didn't realize that the flood was going to come. And when the flood came, that's what took them by surprise, okay? So not even the elect of Yahweh will be watching, who are watching and praying will know the exact time of Yeshua's return. Because remember, he says in Matthew 25:13, watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour when the Son of Man comes. Okay? But we're told to watch. Okay? To watch and pay attention. By watching and paying attention, that will give us an idea that time is closer and closer and closer. So some have thought that Yeshua meant only his disciples would know the time of his return. But Kepha even asked Yeshua, you remember he said, do you just speak this parable to us, or do you also speak it to others? In Luke 12, verse 40 and 41, he says, but you, Yeshua said, but you therefore be ready, okay? For the Son of Man comes in an hour when you don't think of it. Then Kepha said, teacher, do you speak only this parable only to us or to all? You know, to everybody or what? Well, Yeshua showed Kepha that even the elect living in these last days would know something here if they were paying attention. And in Luke 24, verse 42 and 43, it continues on. Yeshua said, who then is that faithful and wise servant whom his ruler will find, or will make ruler of his household, to give him their portion of food in due season? And of course, you can tie this in. You know this is Yisrayl Hawkins, okay? As he's the faithful and wise steward. And he's a ruler over this household, and he's taking care of us in due season. Blessed is that servant whom his ruler, when he comes, will find him doing so, okay? So Yeshua warned us to be faithful and to be righteous, doing this work, so that when he returns, you know, he'll find it's acceptable before him. Now, in Yechezkiah 14, 13 through 14, he says, Son of man, when the sins of the earth has reached their peak, that is, their full measure, I will stretch out my hands against it, and I will cut off the supply of the bread, send famine upon it, cut off the beast from it. And in verse 14 he says, but though these three men, Noah, Daniel, and Eob, were in it, they would deliver only themselves by their righteousness, says Yahweh. Okay? So Noah, Daniel, and Eob were considered very righteous men. But yet, if they were in this day, today, they can only save themselves. It's the same with us. Each individual has to work out their own salvation with fear and trembling, as it says, right? So we see here, continuing on here, Yeshua's coming here on page 209. Yeshua's coming is dependent upon Satan's energy. And the protection given to Yahweh's followers is closely connected with the coming of Yeshua. Okay? Remember that the whole world is involved in this because the whole world is deceived. Now, Satan has to put out a lot of energy because of the fact of the work that the house of Yahweh is doing. Now, she is willing to destroy this entire earth to oblivion, to make it ashes under the soles of the feet, just to wipe us out. And there's 7 billion, estimated 7 billion people alive. How many is in the house of Yahweh? What percentage of the earth's population is that? But we're the only reason why she's going to influence the nations, and these 10 kings are going to come against the Vatican and so forth, and include, involve the whole earth in nuclear war, just to try and get rid of us. Over here on page 210, I just want to look at 2 Thessalonians 2:9, because it says, talking about Satan, it says, who's coming, Yeshua's coming, whose coming is after, it says, after the workings of Satan with all power, signs, and lying wonders, okay? So before Yeshua's return, Satan is going to be very, very busy in doing these things, okay? Because people are going to die. There's going to be a tremendous amount of people who are going to die in these wars. And these killings are going to take place, and people are going to be, even as Yeshua said, to be fearful. They'll be having heart attacks. Remember, it says their hearts will be failing them for fear of the things that's going to take place. So this is talking about Yeshua's return, and also about the energy that Satan is going to put forth. Here on page 2:11, it says, talking about the killing of the saints. The first killing of the saints started after Yeshua ascended into heaven, and then the persecution arose. Okay, in Acts 8, verse 1, it says, Shaul was consenting unto his death, and at that time there was a great persecution against the congregation, which was at Jerusalem, and they were all scattered abroad throughout the regions of Yada and Samaria, except the apostles. So history shows that this great persecution is just a continuation of the hatred of the non-believers who hate Yahweh's word, and they've always gone after the believers and have always attacked them and tried to destroy them. But many righteous men and many prophets of Yahweh were martyred before. This was talking about the time of Stephen here, whenever Shaul consented to his death. But many people were martyred before that time. They say that there could be trillions of people who had died. In Fox's Book of Martyrs, they record a lot of that stuff that's in there on a lot of those things that take place, or that took place back then. And remember now, Fox's Book of Martyrs was written at the time when these things were going on. Okay? So he had to hide, and he had to hide his writings. He had to do this writing in secret, and couldn't even reveal what he had written until the right time. Now the believers, they were even refused the privilege of burying their dead. They had to, and so the dead just died, and people were laid wherever they were. And so you could see that the earth became even more defiled, and that was one of the reasons, if you remember, why the Black Death took place, because of the fact of all the dead bodies. They couldn't bury them. They didn't, there were so many of them that they couldn't bury him, and they didn't bury him. They just left him there. And so all the blood and body fluids and everything ran out on the streets and everything, and this just spread forth great disease until it became what was known as the Black Death. Okay. Now, these who have died, of course, as it talks about the martyrs, these were martyred by Christians, of course. The Christians try and say that this was them, okay, that it was Christians who had died. But it wasn't. It was Yahweh's people, the believers that had died. They were martyred by the Christians. And, of course, this came on the direct order of the popes. You know, he was right in there. And there's plenty of history showing that, showing how evil these popes were. But all these did symbolically were crying out to Yahweh. Remember how it talked about Abel's blood? Yahweh said, Abel's blood cries out unto me, you know. It's the same thing here. And we see in Revelation 6, verse 11, it says, until the full number of their fellow servants also and their brethren should be killed as they were, should be completed. So it's talking about a full number here, okay, a full number. This is all those who must die as is prophesied. Remember that. In fact, it says in Revelations 13, 9 through 10, hear if you have an ear. And in verse 10, Revelations 13:10, it says, for he who is for captivity will go into captivity. Okay? And we see this in the case of the great Kohan Yedidya and all those refugees as well, who's in these refugee camps, who have written in and are following the teachings of the house of Yahweh. They're in captivity. And he who is for the sword must be killed by the sword. So who knows those who are in war-torn countries? You know, they're there. They may have to face death. They may not. But if it's the will of Yahweh, they will. But they will be resurrected. And herein is the patience and the faith of the saints tested. Okay? So a saint is one who will strive to keep all of Yahweh's laws. So if these people have to go through this captivity, they have to go through this war and so forth, these hard times, if they prove themselves worthy to Yahweh, then, you know, Yahweh will resurrect them. Now, meanwhile, at Abel, of course, is the protected place, right? Remember, the gates of hell will not prevail against us. So we're promised in Revelations 3, verses 10 through 13, he says, because you have kept my laws and the words of the prophets which purify you, I will also protect you from the time of the sentence of death. That's the carrying out of the sentence of death, the oppression, the affliction, the wrong, the suffering, the violence, the outrage, the rape that will come upon all the world to test and prove a point to those who dwell on earth. So notice, this is going to come to pass as a test, but it's to prove to the people that this is results of their sin, right? Continue on, it says in verse 11, but behold, I come quickly, Yeshua says, hold fast that which you have, that no man take your crown, because we can allow someone to take it from us. If we are not on guard, and we don't fully believe Yahweh, and we don't trust in Yahweh, and we lean on our own understanding, we can lose our crown. That crown is the position that Yahweh has. Remember, it says that right now a position is reserved for us in the heavens, right? Yahweh already has the offices picked out for us already. He's just letting us qualify for those things. Now, if we do certain things, we can disqualify from the offices. We can still have eternal life, but we will lose what Yahweh has in store for us. Verse 12, so he who overcomes, I will make a pillar in the house of my Father, and he will never go out of it. Notice, he will never leave the house of Yahweh. He will always remain in it. And I will write upon him the name of my Father and the name of Yahweh Shema, which comes down out of heaven from my Father. We will be known as the sons of Yahweh. For the name of Yahweh shall surely be restored at Abel. He who hears Yahweh's call and obeys it, let him hear the words of Yahweh that are taught to the called out ones of the house of Yahweh. Now remember, along with the energy that Satan must exert against the house of Yahweh will come those lying wonders, right? So we'll take a look at that in a moment. Because that's covered. Where's that covered at? somewhere in here, a little bit later on, the signs and the lying wonders. But notice here, when this full number's been completed, okay? Because remember, it also talks about in Revelations, it says that many will wash their robes and so forth, right? And try and make themselves clean so they can be accepted by Yahweh. This full number, okay, must come to pass. So the exact time that Yahweh sends Yeshua depends fully on the energy that Satan displays against those who keep Yahweh's commandments and have Yeshua's testimony. Okay? So Satan is really going to have to be working hard to try and tear down what the house of Yahweh is doing. And as I said, along with that energy will come the signs and the lying wonders. Let's cover that. Let's cover that now. Okay, the signs and lying wonders. In 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 9, it says, whose coming is according to the energy of Satan, who works with all power, signs, and lying wonders. Okay? The word power, according to Thayer's, is number 1411. It means strength in power, okay, because we're talking about the power, okay? The Satan comes with all power, signs, and lying wonders. The word power in Strong's is 1411. It means strength or power, but it also means ability, okay? So ability is given. In other words, a certain amount of freedom, so to speak, is given to them. In other words, they are allowed to do something. Power also means power for performing miracles, and this is going to be seen, okay? Performing miracles. That's something that's going to take place. Power, it also means power consisting in or resting upon armies, forces, or hosts. Well, the hosts, of course, are the gods of heaven, right? And the army will stand on his part and destroy many, as is written in Daniel 8, verses 24, 11, and also chapter 11, verse 31. Now, the signs. There says, this is number 4592. It means a sign or a mark, like the mark of the beast, right? That by which a person or a thing is distinguished from others and is known. And of course, that's been since the very beginning. Okay, if you go back to Genesis 6, verse 4, it says, and there were tyrants on the earth in those days, and remember also afterwards, right? There's always been tyrants in man's society. When those who follow the gods, those who worship the gods come, they will bring forth those mighty ones who are enemies of Yahweh, men which have even in the days of old were known as men of infamous name. So notice, they were known as men of an infamous name. Well, that's exactly what you see with signs, right? Sign, a person or a thing that is distinguished from others and known. Okay? Now, this word sign means a sign, a prodigy, a portent. That is an unusual occurrence transcending from the common course of nature. Anything that's strange, right? Anything that doesn't jive with what's considered as being natural, right? The word sign is number 5579. It means perverse or deceitful precepts. Well, remember, many of the laws in Daniel 7:25 are immoral laws of being passed, right? And then we see the word wonders. Wonders. That's Thayer's 5059. It means a miracle performed by anyone. This is going to come to pass very soon. Okay? These miracles, because of the fact that one commentator said about the signs and lying wonders, he said that such signs and miracles are not real, but reigned only in appearance, not in truth, like those that were done by the magicians of Egypt, and they were done to countenance lies and to induce persons to believe. And how many miracles and lying wonders that the Church of Rome pretends to do. Everybody knows about these things, right? Just, what was it, today or yesterday? Mother Teresa is now known as Saint Teresa. Okay? You know, but remember, in order to be a saint, you have to have so many miracles that are performed, right? Well, these are all these signs and these lying wonders, okay? But people can relate to this and know that the Catholic Church, like this commentator says, well, you know, basically people know about what the lies that the Catholic Church teaches about these miracles and stuff. But if that's all that they're looking for, and that's what they're going to be looking for, this is why they're going to be caught off guard. Because the Scripture says that when the demons are let loose with this power, these signs and these lying wonders and these miracles could even deceive you if you let it. That's how powerful they're going to be and convincing they're going to be to this whole earth. Remember, Yeshua said, even the very elect could be deceived, right? They can be. Anybody can be deceived if you let your guard down. If you believe what the prophet said, you would know automatically. When something takes place, you would think of these scriptures. And remember what the laws and the prophets speak about. And you would know that these are lying signs and wonders. And it wouldn't deceive you. However, the earth will be deceived, and the people will greatly be deceived with these things, because these are going to be miracles and lying wonders that has never been seen before on earth, ever. Never has these things been seen before. This will all be part of the great deception to pull people into it. And many who are weak-minded, who are aware of Yahweh's house, may be swayed and pulled away and think that that's really what they're looking for, not the house of Yahweh. And that's what Satan wants, is to pull these things into a person's mind. Okay? Very subtle. She's very subtle and very crafty. And she do whatever she can to pull people away. So Yeshua's return here goes on to say in Mark 13:32, but of the day and that hour knows no man, no, not the Malachim which are in heaven, neither the Son, but the Father only. So it's only reserved for him. And it says, how will Yeshua return? Will it be by boat? How about by plane? Or maybe by spaceship, huh? People have come up with all sorts of different things. You know, they're thinking that they can actually escape tribulation by going up in spaceships and stuff. Well, of course, I ain't never seen nobody build one yet, you know, but there's certainly been a lot of tribulation and stuff that people have gone through. But as we stated at the beginning of this chapter, many people think the Savior will return secretly or invisibly, okay, silently to rapture away the saints. Also, as previously stated, this is simply just not scriptural, okay? They really believe in this rapture stuff, you know, but Yeshua's return, you know, he hasn't already returned, like one of the teachings is, that the churches are his kingdom, because his kingdom is based upon righteousness, not upon evil, not upon God worship, as the churches teach. And there is no secret rapture, okay? Because Christ, you know, in the rapture theory, they teach that Christ is going to return and snatch people away, and people will be, you know, they'll be driving in the road, and all of a sudden, poof, they disappear out of the car, and they went right through the roof, and they're floating up in the sky, going up into heaven. Or they're in planes, and all of a sudden, poof, there's no pilot there flying the plane, so the plane goes crashing because the pilot was a Christian, and he's going off into heaven too. You know, he would just zap right through the roof of the plane and went on out. But Scripture doesn't say anything at all like that. And here's what it does say. In Limmuwdyah 13, okay, Limmuwdyah 13, verses 24 through 30, he says, Yeshua presented a parable to him, saying, the kingdom of heaven can be compared to a man who sowed worthy seed in his field. But while men slept, okay, in other words, they were not awake to righteousness, they slept for a while. His enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat, then went her way. Of course, the tares are those who don't keep Yahweh's laws, those who want a mixture of righteousness and evil, and the wheat is those who want the righteousness. So when the plants grew up, the wheat formed the ears of grain, and the tares, the sinners, were discovered. Then the servants of the householder went to him and said, Ruler, did you not sow worthy seed in your field? But where did these tares come from? And he said to them, an enemy has done this. The servant said to him, well, do you want us to go out and to pull them up? He said, no. Give them space to overcome. Okay? But he said, no. You might pull up the wheat while you're pulling up the tares. In other words, some who have fallen away, they may recover. In verse 30 he says, but let them both grow together until the harvest. And at the time of the harvest I will say to the reapers, first gather together the tares, and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. Do you get it? Anyone who wants to be raptured is going to be raptured into hell fire, according to their teaching. That's not going to be going to heaven, because he says here, first gather together the tares, bind them up and throw them in the fire. But yet these Christians are too ignorant to comprehend this, to realize that their teaching, what they're saying in their teachings is that, they want to be raptured, because they teach that two will be together, one will be raptured and the other one will be left. That's not what the scriptures teach. It's a complete false doctrine. There's no such thing as a rapture theory. He says here in 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 2 and 3, but you yourselves know perfectly that the day of Yahweh so comes as a thief in the night. But when they say peace and safety, and that's what we're looking for, right? Peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they will not escape. Okay, so there's not going to be any escape for them. They're not going to be raptured. There will simply be no escape, Yahweh says. Because of this misunderstanding of 1 Thessalonians 5, verses 2 and 3, many think that Yeshua is coming as a thief in the night. And these are the ones that think, that they're going to have it made, that all they got to do is just believe. But the thing is, they don't believe. They don't believe in what the prophets have spoken, and Yeshua calls them fools. Now, 1 Thessalonians 5, verses 4 and 6 says, but you, brethren, are not in darkness, that the day should overtake you as a thief. Okay, because a thief comes when no one suspects it. But he says, if you're watching, the way that he said, you'll have a close idea, and you'll know to be ready. You are all the children of light and the children of the day. You're not of the night, nor of the darkness. Remember, Ephesians talks about the children of darkness, right? The children of the night. But we're children of the day. Therefore, and the light, of course, is the laws of Yahweh. We're the children. We're the offspring who keep the laws of Yahweh. Therefore, let us not sleep as others do. Remember I had said in the parable, Yeshua said, while men slept, they didn't awake to righteousness. They slept in sin. Let us not sleep as others do, but let us watch and be sober. Be awake, be diligent, be watchful, and watch for these things to take place. Because when you see the prophecy, the thing is with the prophecies, you have to, that's why Yeshua said you're a fool if you don't believe these things. You have to believe in prophecies. But people don't believe in them. So they can't even see things that take place. With us, we see things take place in the news, and it can be just such a simple thing. But to us, it means something because we know what the prophecies speak about, right? Just all of a sudden, you're watching the news, and it talks about these 10 Orthodox priests come together. To the world, that means nothing. They have no clue what that's talking about, But when you understand the prophecy that speaks about the 10 kings, then it makes perfect sense. And so all of these things, have value to us as we understand these things, because we put line upon line, here a little and there a little, together, and it begins to make sense, and you begin to see the whole plan of Yahweh taking place. Just like they selected the person who would become the high priest to offer the sacrifices for the temple. I don't know about you, but I think that'd be pretty stinking scary to have that position. Because who gives them that authority? Who gives them that authority to take that position of becoming a high priest? And then they think that you just go up there and offer this animal sacrifice and poof, that's going to bring them back. What's going to bring? It will draw them closer back to God, or as they say, capital G space or underline D, or sometimes you'll see G-D. Okay, they won't even put the O in there to say God. So I don't know how they pronounce that. GD, I guess. Praise the GD or whatever. So what difference does it make whether it's a capital G or a little g? They're so blinded to the fact. But that's the deception. When you think about it, that's a great deception. You remember Revelations 12:9 says the whole world is deceived. This whole world, 7 billion people, do not know Yahweh. I don't care if they're in an assembly or someplace where they don't know Yahweh. They think they do. They're familiar with his name. That's it. They don't know him. The only way that you can know Yahweh is to be in the house of Yahweh. And we are a drop in a bucket of water compared to the whole earth. Don't take those things for granted. Because when the deception comes and the miracles begin to show and so forth, this is going to be a big pull on people. Yeshua said, if they say I'm in the desert, don't believe it, right? But the people are going to fall for it. So this plainly shows that the true believers will not be caught off guard in the day of Yahweh. There's going to be a great period of upheaval, but it won't catch them unaware because it will be watching and seeing what the prophecies state. In Revelation 16:15, he says, behold, I come as a thief. Blessed is he who watches and keeps his garments so that he won't be naked and see his shame. But remember, the wicked do not understand. They cannot understand, okay? So they're not going to see these things. Because when a thief robs a home, do they come invisibly? No. A thief comes when a person is asleep, or he's away, or he catches them off guard. But no one knows when a thief comes. If you did, you'd probably call the police and have someone waiting there, to be able to catch him. But you don't know when somebody's going to break into your house and so forth. So that's the analogy that Yeshua used in Revelation 16:15 there, talking about the thief catching you off guard. But if you watch, you'll be able to know. You won't stand there naked and ashamed. You'll have your garments. You'll have your holy garments. You'll be clothed in the garment of righteousness. And you won't have to worry about the nakedness of the shame of sin being upon you, right? Matthew 24, verses 42 to 44 says, watch therefore, for you know not what hour your king does come. And know this, that if the head of the house had known in what watch the thief would have come, he would have watched and wouldn't have suffered his house to be broken into. Therefore, be ready, for in such an hour as you think not, the Son of Man comes. Okay? And of course, that's the reason, because, if we knew the exact time, people would get slack. People would get slack. And they'd goof off and think, okay, well, I still got another week, so I can just mess around. And, a couple of days, I better start getting right with Yahweh now. Tomorrow's the day. So, man, I am perfect saint today, right? And everybody would try and get ready at the very last moment, So this is the reason why Yahweh does this, that he doesn't let us know, so that because we've got to prove ourselves to him that we desire this with all of our heart, soul, and might, as the law says, right? To love Yahweh with all your heart, soul, and might. So he's got to see if this is really what we want, if this is really what we desire. So he's going to try and catch us off guard. But having put aside this false idea, this false doctrine of a secret coming, let's see how Yeshua actually comes. Now, this doctrine of this false coming, okay, the secret coming of Yeshua, okay. I'm going to just give you a scripture here. another one I want you to think about. Okay? And this is in Matthew 24, verses 38 to 42. And he says, for just in those days before the flood, remember we were talking about, this is what Yeshua said about in the days of Noah. For just as in the days of those before the flood, when they came eating and drinking, marrying while given in marriage, until the day that Noah went into the ark, and they did not know until the flood came and swept them away, so also will be the coming of the Son of Man. For then two will be in the field. You know from Yeshua's parable, the field is the world. One will be taken. You're going to be raptured. No, not really. One will be taken and the other left. Two will be grinding at the mill. One will be taken and the other left. Therefore watch, for you do not know what hour your ruler will come. Okay? And in verse 41, in italics, it says two women will be grinding. Women is in italics because that was grinding at the mill was something that the women did. But you notice he says two will be taken. Okay? Two will be there, one will be taken, and the other left. Now, I want to show you what those words mean. The word taken is Strong's number 3880. It means to receive near, to associate oneself, to assume an office. So this is what they're going to be taken for, so they can be given their rewards. Thayer says it means to take to oneself, to receive something transmitted, an office to be discharged. So the one who will be taken will be given these offices. The one left, Thayer's number 863, it means to send from oneself, to send away, to bid go away, to depart, to omit. Okay? So that will be the one who they will be taken out of the kingdom. Remember, Yeshua talked about the parable, how that people would be enter into the kingdom, and then the Malachim would go searching through and saying, "How did you make it in here?" And it would be taken out and bound hand and feet and taken out. And that's going to be a horrible, horrible time to be able to see that, because these people are going to deceive themselves, thinking that they actually made it, Of course, those will be ones who had the opportunity but refused it. Because remember, when the resurrection comes, okay, all those who had the opportunity, even though they refused it, they're going to be resurrected. They're going to be brought up to the sea of glass, and of course the judgment and so forth will take place. Now, Matthew 24, verse 30 and 31, he says, "Then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they will see the sign of the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory." Notice the tribes of the earth will be mourning because they're going to see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. They're going to be sorrowful for the fact that they're going to want it, still going to want it their way. They're still going to, the last man to stand is still going to be in their attitude to try and wipe everybody out, But he will, notice verse 31, "He will send his Malachim with a great sound of a trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of the earth together." Gathering together his elect, notice. This is being done now. The gathering is taking place now, as the house of Yahweh is working, gathering the people together. Okay? Because here in Matthew 13, verse 40 and 41, he says, "Just as the tares are gathered and burned in the fire, so will it be at the end of this age. The Son of Man will send out his Malachim," and that's not angels, that's human beings, okay? He will send out his Malachim, his ministers who teach, "and they will gather out of his kingdom all who cause others to fall away, and those who break the law of Yahweh." Okay, so when he's gathering, this gathering takes place, as it says here, that he will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. This gathering is taking place, and anybody who thinks that they can make it in, you might think, well, Yahweh's, why is he going to allow that to take place? Why would he allow people to make it in there? But they're not going to make it to his throne. They're not going to make it into Yahweh's Shema. They're not going to make it that far, because it's a place of holiness and so forth. But they are going to make it to the judgment. Remember, the judgment will take place on the sea of glass. And that's where they will be judged. They will appear before the heavenly courts there, and they will have to be judged. And so at that time, when they see these things and see what they could have had, and they let it go, it was their choice. But if that's what they choose, then they will be allowed to have what they work for, and that's death. Okay, here in continue on page 214. Matthew 24:30 says all the tribes of the earth will see Yahshua when he returns. So this is definitely not an invisible return. Kind of like the Jehovah's Witness said he returned in 1914. Okay. I don't think anybody's seen him walking on the streets. Anybody seen him around? I know. Jesus went to Chicago and he left from there and he went to New Orleans. That's where he went. Yeah. Y'all remember that song? That's about the mindset that they have. Well, all of a sudden it's like, whoa, he didn't return. So he spiritually came back. So they had to change their teachings to that. See, the house of Yahweh never changes its teachings. The teaching of the house of Yahweh has been the same since Abel's time. We don't change our teachings. The world can't comprehend the prophecies and the mercy of Yahweh, so they think evil thoughts in their minds, and they think that, well, now you're teaching something different. That's what the followaways always say. Well, now you're teaching something different. We've never stopped teaching the same thing since the house of Yahweh has been established. I've been here 30 years, and I can tell you that. I know that. I've seen that since I've been here. So he's definitely not invisibly returning. But Yeshua's coming will be a tremendous noise, it says, right? The sound of a trumpet. At the same time, all the tribes of the earth will see Yeshua. Because, hey, when nuclear war breaks out, global nuclear war, I don't think it's going to be a quiet time, do you? It's going to be a horrible time. Because remember, he's got to come and the clouds have to be rolled back. All that debris that's up there from those nuclear bombs, all that's going to have to spread apart in order to be able to see him. So there's nothing invisible or quiet in the way that Yeshua returns. In Matthew 24, verse 27, it says, for as the lightning comes out of the east and shines into the west, so also shall be the coming of the Son of Man. And if you remember, that talks about, for as the light will depart from the east and through revelation and truth, truth and prophecy will come from the witness in the west. And so also will be the coming of the Son of Man. Okay? In other words, he will be bringing forth this message of the kingdom at this time. So that's another clue that Yahweh's given into us to show us that we're living in the last days, that we can believe and trust in him. He has so many precise things. Yahweh is so precise when he speaks, and he inspires the prophets to write these things. And to think that they wrote these things, but they couldn't understand them. Like Daniel, it troubled Daniel so much to be able to write these things and wondered what they meant. But he said, Daniel, go your way. You're gonna have to die because it's not for you. It's not for you to understand these things. No one understood these things. All that the prophets wrote, they didn't understand these things. It wasn't until these last days when the house of Yahweh has been established. And then at a time while the house of Yahweh was established, this understanding became greater and greater and greater, and to the point to where these seals could be unveiled. But Yahweh worked with us. Okay? He worked with us and got us to a point to where he could do that. But until we had a mind of understanding to where we could get to the point to where he could use Yisrayl Hawkins to reveal these things, Yeshua had to wait. And I'm sure Yeshua was pretty eager to have this stuff done, because he's eagerly waiting to be joined together with us. So it says Yeshua's coming will be as brilliant as lightning in the sunshine. In Revelations 1:16, he says, and he had in his right hand 7 stars, and out of his mouth went a sharp 2-edged sword.
and his countenance was as the sun shining in his strength. Okay? So you see here out of his mouth with a sharp two-edged sword. You know, you can imagine the way that they describe and draw the pictures of the beast, right? The seven-headed beast with their crowns on their horns and these dragon-looking creatures and so forth, you know. They could draw the same thing for the Savior here, you know, having this sharp tongue, which is a sword coming out of his mouth. You know, how much sense does that make? Draw a picture like that. Let a child draw a picture like that, and you'll be ready to correct them very fast, won't you? Because of the fact it's like, why are you drawing that? You know, and you want to know why they did something like that, you know, because it's not normal. It doesn't glorify mankind or Yahweh, because that's not the way that we're made. And yet the Christians draw all of this stuff this way, and they can't even comprehend what they're drawing. You know, to them, they see, well, the scripture says a seven-headed beast, but they don't have any ideas to interpret the scriptures to show, and it's written right there, you know. They've only had a little here and a little there, because you find some of these things in ages back, you know, when people did study the scriptures when it came out, back into the hands of people. And that's really when the old commentaries were written, is when, you remember, for 1,500 years there was no book of Yahweh, right? And so even the scriptures themselves were taken away. But when they finally started coming back in the 1800s, most of the commentaries were written and stuff, well, people had some understanding, and they had an inkling. They knew all and had seen with their own eyes even all of the evil that the Catholic Church had done. So they knew that these seven heels, they knew that this was talking about the popery, and they wrote it even in their commentaries and stuff. But they couldn't understand anything beyond that point. So Shaul describes Yeshua's coming in the same manner, openly, loudly, and brilliantly, not secretly or invisibly. Shaul adds one thing too. He shows that Yeshua's coming is to be a time of the resurrection of the dead and a change for the living. Notice 1 Thessalonians 4, verses 16 and 17. For Yeshua himself will descend from heaven with a shout, "Yo, here I come." No, not really. That's not what he's going to do, right? The shout is the message that's going out, right? Lift up your voice like a trumpet and let it blast, right? It's the trumpeter sounding. He's telling right now. He's shouting right now. Just like it says Yahweh pleads with all flesh, right? He's pleading with all flesh, trying to get them to realize what's going to take place. And the voice of the Malgadal, and with the trumpet of Yahweh, notice. And the dead in the Messiah will rise first, notice. And then we which are alive and remain will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet Yeshua in the air. And so we shall ever be with him. But it doesn't mean that we're just going to go up in the air and we're going to stay there. Okay? But we will go up to the sea of glass, and there will be the judgment, and then we will come back to the earth to cleanse it up. But we're going to have to stop here at bottom of page 214 here. And notice he says, 1 Corinthians 15, he says, "Behold, I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we will be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed." There's something in our bodies now that will be changed. The blood within us. Remember, the life is in the blood, but it's going to be changed so that we will be flesh and spirit. We're still going to be flesh and bone, but we will be spirit, not blood. That's what will keep us alive. And of course, that spirit, remember, as Yeshua said, the flesh is useless without the spirit. Keeping of Yahweh's laws is going to keep us alive. The one last verse here says, Revelations 11:15, "And the seventh Malach sounded, and there were great voices in heaven, saying, The kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Father and of his Messiah, and he will reign forever." Notice the seventh Malach sounds, okay? That will be an awesome time when Yeshua Messiah will tell Yisrayl Hawkins, "Get ready, I'm coming." We're going to see that, brethren. We're going to see that. May Yahweh bless you. We got to stop here. The Kahan next week can take off on the top of page 215.